It's great to be here. How's everybody doing? Good? Great? All right, fantastic. Well, I'm super pleased that I was asked to come here and speak with you. I'm really excited to be at this conference. I've been to a bunch of conferences, and I love this kind of format where you can get together and really talk to people, network, get to know one another, and ultimately do some business together. So I'm going to take you through, let me go backwards here. I'm going to take you through what I think is an incredible formula for you to think about how to create an amazing vision for your company. And whether you're a founder of a company, whether you're part of a company, you're probably one or the other. And this is something that you can take back with you when you go back to the offices and start talking to them about what the future is going to look like. And I'm going to try to lay this out for you very specifically. So, going to take you back to 2015, nearly 5 years ago now. Actually, it was January of 15. Catherine Petrelli, who's my co-founder, and I were in Hong Kong, and we were out there looking for money. It was, beautiful Hong Kong building, big investment firm. Kabbage was sort of young. We'd gotten through our Series D, so it doesn't sound like we were that young, but we were much smaller than we are today. We were approaching about 100 million in revenue. We had, as I said, completed our Series D round. We were looking for a huge Series E investment, and this was really the opportunity. The space was super hot. Everybody knew about Kabbage at that point. We had done a good job just going around to conferences around the world, talking, telling our story, and this was a big opportunity for us. A couple of others had IPO'd. And as I said, we were looking for something around $130, $150 million in an investment, and we were there. We were talking to this guy, Tom, and we were going through, he was asking us a ton of questions. We were running through a presentation. We had gotten really good at giving presentations over the last 6 or 7 years. And so we were just heading through that. We were jumping over all the hurdles that were thrown at us. We were exchanging glances, Catherine and I. We had this osmosis way of talking to one another without actually speaking any words, but we were very excited. We thought this was going to be the opportunity, and then the question came from Tom with a huge investment firm. He said, "What's your vision for Kabbage? What's your vision for Kabbage?" And, when that question was asked of us, we sort of sat back. Literally nobody at that point had ever asked us that question. What was the vision for Kabbage? So we sort of went there and we're like, huh? We weren't sure what was going on, and I was actually trying to stall for time. And Tom he goes, like in 5 or 10 years, where do you think Kabbage will be? And that was the moment where we started exchanging glances. And unfortunately, this is a baseball reference from the US, so probably a little bit lost here. Probably should have done something for European football. We didn't know how to answer it. We had literally hit the wall on that question. And we stammered and we stuttered and we weren't able to do it. And we eventually replied, more and better. In other words, we do more of what we were doing and we try to do it better than we were doing it today. And Tom was like, "Are you serious? Like, really? That's what you're going to be doing?" And we were like, "Yeah, what's wrong with that?" He goes, "That's not a vision. And if you don't have a vision for me, if you can't tell me how you're going to be changing the world going forward, I'm not going to write you a check." So more and better is really not a great vision for a company. It's pretty good for a fast food chain. They've done well with that, but it's not great for a company. But the question is, why should you care about this? Why should you care about creating a vision? And it wasn't really so much about raising money. It was really about trying to figure out how to create a path that the company was to go on, how we were going to, I speak, we have a town hall a couple times a week now to a crowd of essentially of this size or a little bit larger. And they were really looking for a reason to be with the company for a long time. So that's really why you should care, not about raising money. You should care because it gives you a direction. It puts a rudder in the water that allows you to know exactly where you're going, and you can actually steer that boat. So what I'm going to talk again about today is really how to find that vision. To figure out a vision, you first have to understand two things about your company, and they're actually very different things. One is, what is the strength of your company? And the second one is, what's your superpower? Has anybody heard the term when you've been talking to somebody recently? This is happening all over the US right now. And somebody goes, what's your superpower? Or people talk about that. Has anybody heard that term before? See a couple hands out there. But it's becoming very, very popular in the US. But for companies, you all have superpowers as well. But first, we're going to focus on strength. So, determining your strength is really just about how the market sees you as a company. Let's talk about Amazon for a second in 1998, when they were 3 or 4 years into their business, and a lot of people saw them in a very, very specific way. How did people see Amazon when they first launched? What did people think their strength was? Anybody want to throw a word out? Books. Yeah, everybody thought they were a bookseller, right? They were really, really, really good at books. But it turned out that Amazon wasn't particularly great at books. They were incredibly good at e-commerce. That's what they were good at, and they realized that very early on. Now for Kabbage, even predating that meeting with Tom that I was talking about a moment ago, we tried lots of different things in the company, and some of those things you can see on the screen behind me. We launched a product called Carrot, mostly because I bought the domain name carrot.com, and I thought that was a really cool domain, so I was trying to figure out what to do with it. Not a good reason to launch a new product. So we launched a personal loan business called Carrot. And that didn't go so well, so we shut it down. All sorts of things happened. If you're familiar with the challenges that companies like Lending Club and Prosper and others doing marketplace lending in the consumer space have had struggles with, you'll know what I'm talking about there. So that didn't work. We cut partnerships with large banks. Here in Europe, we were live in Spain, Italy, France, and the UK with ING and Santander Bank. And those really didn't work either. And so actually in the course of this year, we've been sort of shutting down those relationships. And the question really becomes, why did they not work? And they didn't work really because we weren't being true to the strength that we had developed over the years preceding that. And so I'm going to get into a little bit of the strength that Kabbage really developed. And it sort of dates back to 2003. So we had been spending the last, and I'll get to 2003 in a moment, but here we were in 2015, 2016, we had been spending a lot of time focusing on building these other products, but what we had gotten really, really, really good at was lending capital to small businesses in very small increments. So what Kabbage does is we provide a working line of capital to small businesses. We've now delivered $8 billion in anywhere from a few $100 chunks all the way up to $250,000, but the average loan being about $6,000 or $7,000. That's a lot of loans when you put out $8.5 billion in $7,000 chunks. That's a lot of loans. That's over 1 million loans that we've made over time, 1.1, 1.2 million loans doing that. So that's been huge. And there we were thinking that we could launch a consumer lending product. We thought we could launch these partnerships with these large banks. But what we didn't realize is we were really good at one thing, which was really working with small businesses. So I thought back to my earliest efforts as an entrepreneur when I was 33 years old. And I was thinking about when I started that business, I would be trying to fall asleep at night. My wife next to me, she would fall asleep in about 2 minutes. And I would lie awake literally for hours trying to calculate whether the company was going to make it to the end of the month. I would literally, in my mind, add up the dollars that I thought were going to come in for revenue over the coming weeks, the expenses we had, how much was going to be left over, what my mortgage was, how much the expenses for my kids were, all those types of things. I was worried about cash flow. I was a small business owner, and I was worried about cash flow. And so I put these two things together, and I realized all these things we'd been doing for hundreds of thousands of small businesses, the capital we delivered, and the experience I had had 15 years earlier, and I realized it was all about cash flow. And that was Kabbage's strength, was helping companies with their cash flow. And it wasn't so much that we were a lending company. That's really not important, because if you're a lending company, then you think about other lending products you're going to be putting out. If you're a company that helps solve the challenges for small businesses that are having cash flow challenges, you're going to create products that impact the daily cash flow of those small businesses, and they might not be lending products. So now we figured out what our strength was. Our strength was working capital and cash flow for small businesses. Then we had to figure out what our superpower is, and the superpower should be thought of as your skill. It's not how the market sees you, it's the unique stuff that you bring to the business that you work on or you run every single day. That's really hypercritical. And I think about when you try to recognize this particular skill or this superpower, I think about a quote from Michelangelo. When he started to carve a statue, he would say, "The sculpture is already complete within the marble block before I start my work. It is already there. I just have to chisel away at the superfluous material." Very, very important. So when you're thinking about what your skill is, I think all of us, when we're asked that question, we want to go, oh, well, we're good at this and this and this and this and this. What is that one thing that you're incredible at? That's really important. What makes you better than others? That's hyper important. So we recognize that, superpower is all about understanding what skill is. For an athlete, it might be about speed or agility, or it can be about hand-eye coordination or something like that. What is it for you? Now let me get back to Amazon for a moment. So we talked about their strength being in e-commerce. Do you know what Amazon's amazing skill is? This one, again, is typically a little bit more buried. You might not be able to think about what is their skill? What are they really incredible at? So the thing that Amazon is incredible at is search and personalization. That is the thing that Amazon does better than any other e-commerce company out there. They're able, if you type in a blue shirt, they're able to show you the blue shirts that make sense for you. That's where their original strength was relative to lots of other companies. For Apple, does anybody know what their strength is? Any ideas? Simplicity of design. That's what they're incredible at. They understand the way that users think about things and how to make that user experience incredibly simple. And when they started the business, their strength was really in the personal computer market. It was really in creating an experience for you that was incredibly simple and using a personal computer relative to all the other personal computers that were out there at that time. So I went and I investigated. I said, what is Kabbage good at? What skill do we have better than anybody else out there? And my perspective on that is bilateral data. That sounds really interesting and sexy. I know, bilateral data. What does that mean? What we ask is our customers actually connect us to the data that relates to how they run their business. So we ask them to actually give us a direct API connection into data related to their bank account and to payment processing, shipping, social, accounting, web analytics, give us all these ongoing data connections. Those ongoing data connections give us information about information and capital flowing into the business and then capital flowing out of the business. If you look at a company like Square and PayPal, they're amazing companies. They're very focused on helping folks receive money. They have incredible visibility into the capital coming into that business. But if you think about it, do they know anything about the expenses of that business? Probably not many of them. That's not something they have. So when I thought about the skill that we have relative to the skill that somebody like Square and PayPal has, it's bilateral, ongoing connected data. That's the thing that really separates us out. So I've talked about strengths and I've talked about skills. What I want to do now is give you a few rules of the road for coming up with an incredible corporate vision. where your company is headed. This can actually even be applied to you personally as you think about things you want to do, your strengths and skills and such for your own personal life. But it's important to understand when you're thinking about it in the context of a vision, how you take your strength and skill and convert it into a vision that makes sense. So let's get back to a couple of the examples that I've been using during this presentation in the first place. Steve Jobs. He has this famous quote, and I'll tell you where this quote came from. It came from a video in 1997, when Steve Jobs came back to Apple. When he returned to Apple, Apple was a complete mess. And he had a meeting with the press, with analysts, with technologists, with all sorts of folks. You can Google this, look it up on YouTube. It's an incredible video. And there was one person in the audience that really got on his back. And they said, hey, what makes you think that you're going to be able to do this? And why did you get rid of this particular type of technology, which we all know is going to be an important technology for the future? And by the way, what the hell have you been doing for the last 10 years? It's a really interesting video because the guy gets super aggressive with Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs first started by taking a chair and going, are you going to come and attack me? It's interesting. And then he sat for a minute and he thought about it. It was very clear that he was processing this question. And he said, you know what? This guy is right in some ways. There may be some use case for this product that can generate some money and create a business case, and that makes sense. He said, but I have to think about what is going to be globally adopted by lots of different people. And to do that, you have to start with the customer experience and work backwards to the technology. You have to start with the customer experience and work backwards to the technology. Incredibly important statement by Steve Jobs. Notice, a visionary when it comes to doing something like this, he talked about starting with the customer experience. It's going to be the first thing I mentioned to you. When you come up with a vision, think about the customer, who you're trying to help, what you're trying to solve for them. Amazon is another example which I've been using, and if you want to read anything really interesting, read Jeff Bezos' 1997 letter to shareholders. It's incredible. But in part, what he said to that is, from the beginning, our focus has been offering our customers compelling value, something they couldn't get any other way, much more selection, etc. Their vision was all around their customers. That was the focus. The next rule of the road, product extensions are not a vision. If you think by just throwing a bunch of different things out there to the customers, you're going to be no better than the cart peddler who was selling a bunch of stuff off their cart 100 or 150 years ago. That's what's going to happen. This is an important statement. Product extensions emanate from a vision, but they do not precede the articulation of the vision. So what you don't do is create a whole bunch of different products and go, how do I come up with a vision statement that fits all the crap that I put out there to the public? That's not how you do it. Getting back to Apple, in 1997, when Steve Jobs got there, the first thing he did was get rid of 70% of all the products that were offered by Apple at that time. And by doing that, and then really focusing the company on the things that were going to add value to customers' lives, he's created 320 times the value. Not him, obviously. You've got Tim Cook and others. Steve Jobs passed away, obviously, 8 years ago. But he really started that journey and set forth the tone for that company forever. Now, let's contrast that with Hewlett-Packard, and hopefully there's not somebody here from HP right now. HP's vision statement, listen to this one. Our vision is to create technology that makes life better for everyone, everywhere, every person, every organization, and every community around the globe. How they've done since then is they've increased in value 1.6 times, while Apple has increased in value 320 times. And the reason, well, they have 5 everys in their vision statement. They did exactly what I said you can too. You can't create a bunch of products and then wrap your vision around what you've created. You have to focus on what you're great at and what your skill and what your strength are. Stop calling yourself the Uber or Amazon of what you do. Find a unique identity for your company or be relegated to being unfavorably compared to those other companies. There's a company called Dektar, I don't even know who it is. They call themselves the Uber of everything. Like literally the Uber for any kind of concept that you want out there. That's not a vision. A lot of you know Revolut, and I know Revolut pretty well. I do like the company, I do like the products, but Nikolai has been quoted as saying that he'll be the Uber of banking. He's also compared them to being the Amazon of consumer finance. That is not a vision. You talk about it, you have to talk about it in the context of customers, of how you're helping people or how you're helping small businesses or whoever your audience is. Great visions are actually visionary. I know that's a shocking statement, but that's really important. Take Snapchat. When it went public, it listed in its registration statement that we're a camera company. They literally, in 2016 or whenever they went public, that's literally what they said their vision was. Camera companies don't even want to be called camera companies. The CEO of Nikon said, we're not a camera company and please don't call us one. And I made that quote up, but I thought it was kind of funny, so I just decided to do that anyway. Here's their competitor, and compare this from a vision statement, how beautiful this vision statement is. Instagram, bringing you closer to the people and things you love, right? It's not about, they don't talk about developing technology that allows you to do X, Y, or Z. They actually talk about bringing you closer to the people and things you love. That is a real vision. So now we've got three pieces: your strength, your skill, and you got to talk about the customer. That's really important. So you start by combining your superpower and strength to create your vision. Getting back to Amazon, their strength was e-commerce. Their skill was search and personalization. Their vision statement in 2019 to be Earth's most customer-centric company, where customers can find and discover anything they may want to buy online. Customer-centric, they combine their strength, which is online, with the customer centricity of search and personalization to create an incredible vision. By the way, your vision can change and grow as you do. So I'm not saying that was their vision 20 years ago, 25 years ago when they started. So strength was e-commerce, search, and personalization. 1995 vision, use the internet to transform book buying into the fastest, easy, and most enjoyable shopping experience possible. And so obviously they replaced strength. That e-commerce is really now all online. It doesn't need to just be buying products online. And their vision statement has changed to be Earth's most, as I said, it went from the book buying to Earth's most customer-centric company. If you think about Apple again, they started out in the computer world helping people, with a really simple experience. They moved on to music, they moved on to phones, they moved on to TV and movies. All with the concept, this simplicity has transcended, and now it's turned into not just being about one specific type of product, it's really about the interoperability of those products as well, and that's incredibly important. So simplicity has really worked for them over time. So for Kabbage, working capital for small businesses is our strength, superpower is bilateral data. What we really want to do is autonomous cash flow management for small businesses. And I'm going to tell you how this turns into a vision statement. You'll see on the left there a chart. Because we have this information about money flowing into the business and money flowing out, we have this great opportunity to help customers answer the questions. If you remember what I said, I was lying awake at night trying to figure out how much cash was going to come in over the next couple of weeks and how much I was going to be paying out to others and how much was going to be left over. We can do that for our customers because we have connectivity to data that tells us all three things: money in, money out, and money at rest. What's left in the bank when you have a surplus as a small business. And by doing that and helping small businesses understand and project out, we can actually do that for them. So my view on Kabbage is really to make it the autonomous driving app for the cash flow of your small business, and to ultimately let the bakers bake. And what this means is if you've opened up a bakery, you've opened up that bakery because you're amazing at baking delicious treats for your customers. You love interacting with your customers. you probably don't like managing your cash flow. That's probably not why you opened up a bakery in the first place. So if we're able to do that on behalf of our customers, the 10 to 15 hours a week that our customers spend focused on cash flow, we can actually allow them to turn that into spending more time with their family, spending more time on their business, spending more time on their hobbies or whatever else it is that they like to do. That's incredibly important. So as you're thinking about vision, remember there's no you in vision, but there is one in future. And so I hope you make sure you're a part of it. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.